I'll go to conferences, I'll do a presentation. Someone will come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've never used a contract. I've never had an issue." Within a year, they're in my inbox with a problem that could have been resolved with the contracts.
Hey, photo BFFs, and welcome to another episode of The Edit. I am Amanda from Seattle.
And I'm Whitney from Minneapolis.
And we usually have Erin from Nashville joining us, but today she is on a field trip with her kiddos. So it's just me, Whitney, and I interviewing none other than Rachel Brenke. I think most of you all know her as the Law Tog, or at least I've always known her as that. If you're a photographer and you have even like sort of dabbled in contracts, I feel like if you've done any sort of Google search, Rachel's name pops up. So she is here today to talk more about what she does and to really break down some things about contracts, because I feel like that is one of those sticky things that when you're first starting out, you don't really understand it. You don't know why you need them. And you're also not even sure how to go about getting one. So welcome to the show, Rachel. It's so good to have you here and to meet you.
No, to meet you too. It's so funny when people are introducing me and you're like, everyone knows who you are. I'm like, no. But I was in like this backwoods North Carolina grocery store by this sleepy beach that we go to. And I had to show my ID to buy something. And the person goes, "Oh my God, I follow you." I don't even live anywhere near there. It's just so funny, like how the world could be so small.
Oh, yes, totally. I know. That's what I love so much about like just doing this podcast and getting to meet people. You do realize that the photo world is much smaller than you think it is.
Yes.
So, Rachel, you are an author, a lawyer, a multifaceted entrepreneur. You are also a Team USA triathlete. Your list, you're also a mom of 5 and a military spouse. So you've got a lot. You are so many amazing things. So I think our audience is going to be really excited to hear more about you. So I want to know about your path to becoming a lawyer.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm glad that we're starting here and that you shared a bit about me other than lawyer, because I feel like people get really squirrely sometimes about lawyers. They can be boring. And if you've ever been with me at a photography conference or seen me speak in person, I'm unhinged. Like, I am not a normal lawyer at all, which is funny because I didn't start out as a lawyer. You know, I have created and sold off multiple businesses. I still have other non-law firm businesses that I had built over the years. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years this upcoming year. And I got into, it's so funny. I went to law school, and while I was in law school, I was actually a photographer. It was how I was able to do my schedule, support my family with, money wise. And I did, by the end of law school, so many people were asking me questions about photography, specifically because I was in photography circles, learning photography and growing that business. And so that's how the Law Tog was born. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be a lawyer for photographers, but then when I realized the demand and the need that's really needed for creatives, that's kind of where I landed. So I really wasn't even truly sure going to law school. It's going to sound funny. I thought about being a prosecutor for a bit, really wasn't even sure if I was going to be a practicing attorney or if it was just a degree I wanted to use to help me in business. But again, like I said, by the end, I saw so much need in the photography industry. And the biggest thing for me is that it was seeing so many others similar to myself who are trying to support their family, not knowing how to navigate to go through the things, and not having the resources to either go hire a lawyer or a lawyer that actually knows the industry, which is still few and far between right now for us. So that's kind of where the Law Tog came about. So that's a good way to bridge the gap between professional done-for-you services, but being able to help from a legal lawyer aspect to photographers so we can get the knowledge so that we can protect ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. And I also really love the name. Like, by the way, like the name is so catchy.
Well, what's so funny is I didn't come up with it. I was in a group of other photography educators. It was when it was in the rise of all these educational websites coming out. And I was like, y'all just help me come up with a name. They came up with it. And I've never truly loved it. So thank you for saying that, because is it in Australia where they call togs? Is it flip-flops or something like that? Or maybe it's underwear. I don't know. Yeah. But it's not photographer. And in the real world, when I say the Law Tog, non-photographers are like, what? So I'm like, yeah, but the photographers know, and that's all that matters.
We totally know.
Yes. Yes. And I want to share that I so So I started my photography business it's probably like 18 to 20 years ago.
Wow.
And when I started, we did not have contracts that we could go get. And so I spent those first years just fiddling about, trying to do things. And I lived in Nashville at the time. And so the lawyer that we ended up using was a music industry professional, but there's still things that they never were able to understand about photography. And so I wish that you had been around when I was getting started. And so, I mean, it's just an amazing resource for people to have so they can go on and just have a starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I just looked around when I was starting my business. So even before that, I actually also have my MBA and I had done business coaching prior to going to law school. Why?
Mm-hmm.
For the same reason, as a military spouse, I was going through cancer when I first was starting my businesses. We didn't have two nickels to rub together. And this was before, I'm going to date myself a bit on this, but this was before Facebook. This was before, we were still, Blogger was still a bit around type of deal, MySpace, but you didn't have this freemium information the way that now Google, ChatGPT, Pinterest, social. We didn't have all of that then. And so for me, it was very much what I learned. I just started blogging about it. So that was actually kind of a 15-year precursor to even coming to the Law Talk, just recognizing the need and what I had needed when I was, basically talking to myself in the beginning as I wrote through my articles. And I'm still do that now. And I think that's kind of also one of the great things about many educators in the photography industry is that they have been a photographer. And so they know the pain points and the pressure that you're going through. And I think that's also, and I say this humbly, but what makes me really unique, not just from the aspect, like you mentioned, even a music entertainment lawyer may not understand photography or vice versa. But if they've never gone through the steps of trying to run their own business, non-law business, and what you're really facing with the clients, it's hard to kind of, you can spout the law all day long, write a good contract, but it needs to work with the psychology of the photography client that you're having, right? It's got to work with the real world problems. And so that's kind of like what I try to marry with everything.
I love that
That's
so
awesome.
much. Okay, so what does your business look like right now then with all of the stuff you just talked about in the past? So right now, what does it look like?
So my key ones that I'm working on right now, Eden Law is my law firm. So that's where we can do the done for you services. Then we have the Law Talk for photographers. I also have two other legal related brands outside of the photography industry. Fit Legally is one for fitness professionals. And then Esquire Essentials is to help lawyers run their law firm legally. Because even though they're lawyers, if they're not a business lawyer, they don't necessarily know what to do. And kind of just me, the mothership, Rachel Brenke. I do all of the appearances and business coaching. So yeah, that's what it looks like.
I love that. And so you've got 5 kids.
I do.
What's the age range of your kids right now?
I don't know if I can say it. I mean, I still technically have a kid, but he's 18 and he's moved
Okay.
out. So is that
Okay.
really still a kid? Yeah, so it's 18, 14. They just had birthdays. Hold on. 18, 14, about to be 12, 11, and 9.
Oh, wow. That's gotta be so cool. I always think like how fun that your kids get to see you do all of this.
Yeah.
I feel like, our generation was maybe one of the first ones to see moms go to work. Like my grandma didn't work when my mom was young, and it wasn't until my mom was out of the house that she ended up working. And I just love that our littles get to see what it's like and to know that you can do both. You can parent and you can also have this amazing career that you really love that fulfills you. And I just think that's one of the coolest things.
One of the good things is my daughter, so not my oldest daughter, number 2, who's 14, I think I came up with the Law Talk and created it like the week that I gave birth to her. So they're the same. So it's like a physical manifestation of watching it. But it's funny you say that about being an example in front of them. My oldest, he was like, oh, I want to be a Twitch streamer and a YouTuber. And old patterns from what I had learned in childhood was, you graduate, you go to college, you get married, you may have a career, may not, depends. And my instinct was, you can't make money online. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, where did that come from?
Yes.
Oh, yes, that's so
And
funny.
I have a 12-year-old and he is the same. And I have to consciously be like, because of course, like YouTube
Yeah.
is one of his career goals, like YouTube, acting, or just, any sort of online thing. And I have to consciously be like, okay, like you can do this. And maybe you don't go to college and maybe that's the best way for you to earn money.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we have to kind of consider the way that people look at the photography industry as well.
yes.
It's always amazing to me seeing non-photographers, non-creatives devalue it.
Yes.
And anything entertainment related,
Mhm.
movies, pictures, even music. But I'm thinking, what do you do for enjoyment? It's all in that entertainment realm. So you're
It is.
buying into it, but you devalue it at the same time. Anyways, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation.
It really is. But yeah.
It is.
Ambria, we had her on her show. She's another photographer in the DC area, and she said the exact same thing where she was like, like, come on, put something in my business here. Like I'm an amazing business owner, and what I do lasts you a lifetime. Like,
Yeah.
what else do you have that in your life that you can say that about? So yes, we very much preach that here.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to dive into contracts because I feel like, our podcast is really geared towards photographers that are new and starting out, or those who have pivoted and are starting something new. So I think contracts are one of those things that I think everybody knows they need to have, but they don't really know why. So I want to start out with that question. So why do you need a contract for your photography business?
Yeah. And actually, I love that we're leading with contracts because I feel like that is one of the easier legal tools to understand and attain and be able to implement as a business owner or photographer. Whereas we get into copyright, it all becomes so convoluted, all these other, legal mechanisms that are out there. For me, contracts works. Why should you have them? Well, I've seen them more than legal tools. Again, you kind of already have heard, if you didn't skip ahead at the front of the podcast, you already heard that I try to combine real world action with the law, but I also do it from a marketing perspective, right? Every action we do in business, we want to make sure that we're informing the customer, we're building up their confidence. And that's what contracts can do, right? They build the buyer's confidence, they outline the expectations, it sets the legal framework. So if there is ever an issue, but it also can help to prevent issues. Why? Because it's going to outline everything and reduce miscommunications. In our Facebook group, the Law Talk group, that is one of the top questions when someone has an issue. The group, I have conditioned everyone now just to ask, what does your contract say?
Yes.
But it's true, because if you go back to either contracts and or communications, that's where you're going to be able to find the pieces of the puzzle to keep this fire from getting bigger if there's a problem, right? That's really where you want to look to. So I feel like I understand as creatives, and it's not just creatives. I see this in multiple fields. You don't understand contracts. You're scared by it. You're afraid to implement it. You're afraid to be asked questions about it, which is where the Law Talk comes in to help and try to help build your confidence on that piece. But I think that it's one of those, the contract can do the work for you, right? Especially if you're one that is, and I also like to call the contract kind of a backbone or the no man, right? Let the contract tell the client no, not you telling the client no. And it kind of helps to soften for those that are not really good with saying no to clients, right? Sending boundaries, it can do that for you. So that's all the reason.
Right here.
It's funny though, as you would think, as very confident as I am as a lawyer, I don't like talking money. And thinks it's something from childhood. Maybe I gotta call my therapist after this, but
There you go.
I don't like talking money. So I put it in a contract and let the contract do the talking for me.
I love
that. Letting the contract do the talk.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it that way before, but it absolutely, because it is so hard, one, to say no.
Yes.
And talking money. And I shared this. It's an episode we've already recorded and we haven't posted it yet, but it might actually be out by the time this goes out. And we had that where we had in our contract meals for our associate studio that we had at the time. And the contract was actually signed by the bride, but the mother did not like that, did not want to feed us. And we ended up even though the contract was signed, we ended up saying no more, But it was so good that we were able, because of that contract, we were able to know right away, rather than us being at a wedding and a mother-in-law, causing some huge chaos that could end up with bad reviews, whatever. So it was, super, super helpful having that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the other thing that I didn't answer of why you should have a contract is it can be a customer service tool for you, right? The contract is going to be there to help prevent the problems, all the things we just talked about, but it's setting a baseline. us as business owners can always go above and beyond that. So, for example, you would put in there, maybe if you had a payment plan, especially as a wedding photographer, you're probably not taking it all up front. But if you write in your contract late fees, which are state regulated by most states, and there's a cap and what all the terms are state regulated. Anyways, why that's important is A, you can't do a late fee if it's not in there, but B, you can always waive the late fee out of customer service if there's some sort of extreme circumstance where you just want to you feel good that day, you feel good about the client, you can do it one time. And so that's the funny thing about contracts. People are like, oh, I'll just write my own, it's a piece of paper. It's really not. I mean, yes, I always start with the clients, and this is, you look at all the Law Talk contracts, it's in chronological order because it works with the psychology of you, the photographer, and your client, what's going to happen from the jump all the way through the end. But it's also looking at how can you all, the photographers, be able to have freedom to be a human outside of the contract, be able to be the business owner, but still have the backing of those terms if you need them.
Yep.
That's awesome.
That's great.
So for photographers, what do you think are the most important items then that they have in their contract?
Ooh, buddy. Everything? No. And see, I'm one of those too. It's putting puzzle pieces together. You don't want it to be so inundating, but you want enough to protect yourself. And that's the dance that we're always doing with the Law Talk templates, staying up with like the trends and the pain points we hear that you all are dealing with. So, baseline to answer your question, I mean, you're always going to follow the who, what, where, when, why, and how, right? That kind of structure of making sure all of that, whether it's, boudoir or wedding or whatever type of photography that you're doing. So, of course, how you're going to get paid, when you want to get paid, how much, because obviously we want to get paid. It's like the important thing here. But for me, oftentimes I tell my clients, if I'm going to custom draft it, I'm like, write out your entire workflow with the client, with your client from beginning to end. And that's really the bones that we use. So making sure you touch pretty much all the steps. And of course, I'm not going to tell them that you edit on Thursdays. Not that. I'm talking about your interacting workflow with the client. But on the legal miscellany, and this can go for any industry, incredibly important. You see people call it boilerplate or templated legal. It's typically at the bottom. That's kind of the catch-all where all this legal miscellany goes. This is where this is what's going to provide the legal basis for you if there is a dispute. What law is going to govern? What kind of dispute resolution are you going to go through? Is you going to require a mediation, or can they just go ahead and go to court and file against you? My most favorite one, you'll chuckle when I say it, is the attorney's fees provision, but not for the reason that you think. Not for not just so I don't get paid. Here's what happens is majority of states, if not all, if a client or either party breaches the contract, you go to court and you see on TV, well, I win, the losing party is going to pay my attorney's fees. It's not unless it was agreed to in the contract. So I've had situations where photographers have delivered everything. They got a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puff client on the other side of the table who decides to file, drags the photographer into court. And in the end, they had a contract, maybe, wrote in the cells or nothing at all, but it didn't have attorney's fees in there. And they're concerned then because they've had to pay me or another attorney to represent them. And even if they win, they're not getting that money back. That money is gone. And so that is a really important one that I always look for and encourage to have in there, because even if you say you may never go to pursue your client for anything, you don't know if they won't do that against you. And oftentimes when I have so many photographers who come with self-drafted contracts, or these contracts out of these free ones in these systems that are available in CRMs that are out there. When they come to me with an issue, I have to tell them, you're looking at paying probably $10,000, $15,000 to resolve this to the end, and you're not going to get it back. That often is a stopping point to not be able to pursue anything simply because you didn't have that one paragraph in there.
Yep. Wow.
Yes.
There you go. I mean, like, I can hear the passion in your voice about that too. But you're right, because I feel like a lot of photographers, you go into this industry because, it's fun. You love making photos. It's fun to interact with people. And it's these legal things that, you hope don't come up. But if they do, you want to make sure you're protected. And I think a lot of photographers I know do have those CRMs and the contracts already written in there, but even looking through, because I looked through the contract that I signed with the photographer that I use, that's definitely not in her contract. And not that I would go after her, but
No, I
that is
don't.
interesting now that you've said that. I'm like, wow, I'm
Yeah.
gonna start looking at photographers' contracts that I end up signing too to see if they have those in there as well.
So imagine what happens when I inquire to photographers to do my headshots and branding photos every year. And I don't want to be like, you see people in groups go, well, this client says they're a lawyer, but I don't want to like hide it. So I'll say,
Yeah.
hey, I run the law talk, but I'm letting you lead. It just is like a whole like little weird dance.
Yeah.
Like, do they think that I'm going on the law talk when I'm just like trying to be transparent? But like,
Yeah, exactly.
which
Like,
is
I'm not trying
another
to
one.
help you with your own contract here. Like, you need
I
to have
had
this in.
some, yeah, they're like, why don't you just send us your contract? And I'm like, no, like I'm hiring you for photos. Go buy it from my site and then I'll get it.
There
Then
you go.
Oh, that's funny.
But
Okay, so
well, no,
oh, go
one
ahead.
more thing I wanted to say on that is to include, it's a big hot topic, copyright, right? Who owns the photographs? And that's going to put that in the contract. And depending on what industry, type of photography that you're doing, commercial, it's pretty common for that to be transferred over to the client. But yeah, so the copyright intellectual property piece obviously is always a big one.
Yeah.
And so that brings up an interesting point. And I don't actually know if we're going to have this listed as a question, but I see this a lot of times because I'm part of the Facebook group and have definitely asked questions there. And we had sometimes clients that would come back because they actually read the contract and maybe they wanted to change it, and also, or maybe they were lawyers.
The worst. They're the worst clients ever.
Well, in general, and there were several times where we were like, well, this is actually really helpful to change it. But how would you advise someone that has a client that comes back and is like, I want to change the contract? Are you like, don't ever change it, or talk with your lawyer?
Yeah, what's funny is I know exactly what what threads you're talking about, because people will jump on and say, we have a contract for a reason, never change it. And I always try to catch in there, be like, that's not actually what I preach and believe.
Okay.
And not because I'm trying to pad the pockets of attorneys, but I want you to consider, and I'll use myself as an example here in a second as a client, but sometimes there's validity to the request. Like when I was doing photography, when I had time, full time, I live in the Northern Virginia region. Like I have an FBI building like 2.5 miles from my house. So a lot of my clients could not be online. So my model release would be standard with my contract, but many of them are not allowed to have, for security, safety reasons, to have an online presence. That is this is why I always say, ask the client, like, what is the reason for them asking for a change? If it's something that's completely going to be detrimental to the photographer and only weigh in favor of the client, I mean, that's completely up to you. It's your business. That's probably a situation where you don't want to change it. I think oftentimes that advisement is given, whether it's in the Law Talk group or others, never change your contract, because it's scary. Well, one, you're probably going to have to go pay a lawyer to fix it, or try to get advice in the Law Talk group, which 99.9 are not lawyers in there. So, buyer beware on posting and the advice that you get. And you're just afraid it's unknown. It's an unknown thing, so it causes fear. The example I'll give of myself, and this causes fights all the time, and this actually gets me fired up sometimes, is, when I go to get photographs taken of myself, because I have developed such a online presence with my face, I want to have control of those photographs. And so what is one of the hot topics we always see? Oh my God, this client asked for copyright. Why? Let me explain to you why. Because by default, if I'm hiring you, Whitney, to photograph my headshots, you're like, sure, I'll give you a commercial license as a permission for use in my business. That's great for my usage. But what happens if all of a sudden my photos are being stuck onto OnlyFans or some other type of site that I don't really want associated with my brand? Nothing against OnlyFans. I'm just thinking the real deep, dark stuff that's out there on the web that could impact a business or not aligned with values. And who am I at the behest of getting those photos taken down? You, if you're the owner. Well, the majority of photographers that I run into in all my career of doing this, I would rough math, 95% of photographers that run into a copyright infringement situation don't ever pursue it because of the funds or the lack of knowledge to do it. So I'm kind of stuck with my photos being used. It could not even be on a CD site. It could just be on another company's website that I maybe am trying to have an exclusive deal over here, and it's going to violate and mess me up, but I can't do anything about it because I'm not the owner of the photograph. So that gives you a good example,
Yeah.
especially in the commercial realm, why people would look at me and go, well, this lawyer wants all the copyright signed over, and everyone in the group's going to tell them, well, lawyer bad, two, never give away your copyrights, but I have a legit reason for why, and I would pay accordingly. So that's kind of two major examples that are reasonable ones. I think that we really should consider changes, but it's all about talking with the client. I think as creatives, sometimes we freeze up because we're afraid it's about to become a confrontation when it may not be at all, and that's kind of where everything goes squirrely.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. That is super helpful. And I had not thought about that copyright before. And especially as you get more well known, but even, it is interesting, even if you, especially with your kiddos. Yeah, that's something to think about.
Adds just like a whole nother layer.
Yes.
Top of things. Okay. So we've talked a lot about money, and this was one question I think that Aaron wanted to know about. If no money is being exchanged for a service, like whether that is maybe you're doing like a model, a model, or like, what do they call it? It was like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the word
model calls.
It was like model calls, but there was it was like there was like a certain little phrase you would use for it. My mind is totally gone right now. Thanks to my
trade
there
for
we go. That was
photos?
what it was. Trade for prints. TFPs. Trade for prints. Which now I'm like, prints. That's so funny. Now I'm
We're kind of aging ourselves in front of the audience right now.
Yes, we are.
But anyways, if you're doing one of those or like a barter as well, do you still need to have a contract if no money is being exchanged?
Yes. So money is not required. What's required is what's called consideration. So there's like specific elements to a contract. Money is the most common one, but I could, like you mentioned, a barter. I could write your contract in exchange for doing photos for me, or like with the TFP or model stuff. Amanda, you would be modeling for me. That would be your consideration, be your time in modeling and permission for me to use those photos in my portfolio. And in exchange, in consideration, you're being given the prints or files or whatever I give you in exchange. So money doesn't have to be. That's why you see sometimes people say, just put $1 on the contract. You don't even have to do that. But yeah, it doesn't have to be monetary. It could even be a promise to do something. Not really a fan of that. I'm also not super huge on barters just because I've kind of always had I've seen them go sideways. So unless you have a really good conversation to say, I'm going to give you $2,500 worth of legal services for $2,500 package of photography, and like clearly outline like the value and the inclusions, like really boil it down. It just is ridden for issues.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ruin a potential business relationship or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I can totally speak to that, where I did a barter with somebody and they literally left the state and I got nothing. So, there you go. You live and you learn. Those things for when you're first starting out. And I was like, well, I'm definitely never going to be doing that again.
Honestly, for me, I know it kind of probably sounds dumb and it has tax implications, but I would rather just pay you for the session than you pay me for contracts, and we keep our lines separate. As even if it's the exact same value, just makes it easier.
Yeah. That's definitely what I found. But again, I feel like, so much of what we try to do here too, like you've mentioned before, Rachel, is because we've been in this for so long, trying to help people that are newer at this not make the same mistakes that we have, and to really learn from the stuff that we've done where we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was that person.
Well, I think we scared the pants off them at this point, because we brought up like all the worst things that could happen. And if you're scared, good. I don't like fear mongering. I really don't. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But like, I want you to have some healthy fear, because it's like when you're learning to swim as a kid, right? You're coming around the pool. You need to have some healthy fear so you don't just jump in and drown, right? You want to make sure that you have some. All these things we talked about, you may just see them on the internet. You may never run into it at all. It's funny. I'll go to conferences. Oh man, I could make a living just on what I'm about to tell you. I'll go to conferences. I'll do a presentation. someone will come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've never used a contract. I've never had an issue. Within a year, they're in my inbox with a problem that could have been resolved with a contract. So
Yeah.
just because you've never had an issue, or you're like, oh, I would never try to sue a client, or that's not the type of business I would never do barters. Still, you got to figure out what works for you. I think at a minimum, I've never recommended anyone to not have a contract.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I mean, that's the thing is when you're a business owner and you've become a business, that to me is just that becomes part of it. It's part of the, you got to do your taxes and you've got to have some of these things in place as well.
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of mistakes that we've made, this is another one that I know that I have done, and I'm sure other photographers have too. Speaking of CRMs and how easy it is to just send your client their contract, they sign it, and then the email comes back to you like, hey, your contract signed it, click this button to countersign. And you get busy and you totally forget to countersign. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, wow, it was already our photo session. Everything already happened. I never actually countersigned my contract. So what does that do to a contract when you as the photographer do not countersign?
I mean, realistically, if you don't have an issue with that client, it's probably never going to come to a head. It's when you don't countersign, client has a problem, and then you're trying to hold the client to the contract, maybe not want to return the non-refundable initial payment, retainer deposit. That's a whole nother conversation. I should have just said any monies. But yeah, my argument would be, let's say you did that, Amanda, and you do the whole session, everything's gravy until it's not, you never countersign, and then your client has an issue. I would still argue that through performance, we may not be able to use all the specific terms of the contract, but that there was a meeting of the minds, there was an intention, they paid you, you showed up, they engaged in the session. Like, there would be enough there, hopefully. That's just base level. It depends on the circumstances surrounding, but that should be enough to prevent escalation or at least resolve it. I'll judge you and shame you if you come to me and tell me you have an issue, you haven't come to a sign. No,
Yeah, I'll judge and shame myself for that. It's definitely one of those where it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. At this point now, it's become part of my workflow and I don't make that mistake anymore. But it's definitely one of those where, you catch it and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I forgot to do that. So yeah. But anyways, that's one of my questions is like, what happens to all of those? And can you countersign after you've what after it's been, and I guess it would still probably send your client there. I don't actually know how that works on the back end of the CRM part of it.
Depends on which one it is. What I used to do way back in the day, before we even had all these CRMs, they would sign, and I don't even think what I used at the time sent them a copy. I would print it off and bring it in my camera bag with me to the session.
That's what I did.
So that I could send it to them. So then you would know before you went if it was signed or not.
If it was signed or not. Yeah. I definitely remember doing that totally.
I mean, we like had a file of all our like printed contracts and would sign them there, so there was because I totally would have, especially now if I was still doing wedding photography, using a CRM like that, I would totally forget. That would be me.
I think that's just because CRMs make it so easy, just kind of set a process and forget it. But that's the hard part. So yeah, making it part of your workflow. Is definitely
it's all about like just setting like an admin day. Like Fridays are my admin catch up of the week, but I do that for all of the businesses, especially the law firm. I go through and make sure engagement agreements are signed, all of that before I start tasking, initiating new business. Just want to make sure that it's all on the up and up. So even though it's automated and I may get a notice that it's good to go, I still go in and verify as I'm adding it to my tracker of all my projects just to be safe.
I love that. Yep. Having that in place. So you have given us so much awesome information, and I really would love to send our audience to you. So what sort of legal education resources do you offer photographers?
I think the best thing to go is to thelawtalk.com. From there, you can either dive into, I've got videos, podcasts, articles, do have paid for courses and the contract templates and checklists. There's so much free information on there. If you get overwhelmed, there's a chat bubble. We have a human that answers it. So if you just need some help.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've always been really big on, I like automation and bots. It may ask you a few questions, but it always gets to a human because come on, I'm the one screaming on the phone, like, pressing 0 100 times to pass the phone through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even from there, you can get over to, if you go to the contact, you can either submit through a contact form to ask the Law Talk team a question, or there's also a spot to get to my law firm. I'm an easy Google, just Rachel. I'm the only Rachel Brenke in the world. So if you just do that.
Okay.
I love that. Makes it nice and easy. So that's awesome that you've got contract templates. Is there a way if a photographer wanted to have a customized template, do you offer, or template, oh my goodness, customized contract? Is there something that you would have so that they could reach you to do something like that?
Yeah, we would just kick you over to my law firm for us to do that for you custom. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That's really great. I wasn't sure if, you have to be in the same state or if that doesn't matter as much. I know that stuff can get sticky when it comes to states and all of the different, requirements for each state.
That's actually a good point. And this is to be mindful. We talked about earlier kind of the type of lawyer you want to have doing contracts and advising on your photography business, but also making sure that they understand the state laws. For me, kind of with my approach and how I'm so different than other firms, I have been training and acquiring attorneys underneath me that have the same mindset. So we have, I think, 15 states represented. They're listed on my law firm website that can do the state specific work. And I'm involved on that, even if I can't sign off on it because I'm not licensed in that state. But all my businesses kind of work together. So the law firm will meet with the Law Talk and kind of say, hey, what are the top states? We'll go through Google Analytics. We'll go through purchase. Who are the top states that we're getting people from? And it's the big ones like California, Florida, Texas, and that. And that's drives me to be able to find resources for you all that are state specific. So they're ready to go when you need it.
That's so awesome.
That is really great.
Plus the other thing too is I feel like, when you've been in business and, all of a sudden you've realized, oh, I might need a lawyer for this. I feel like you don't really know where to start.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a scary thing and you don't know who is going to be a trusted lawyer as well. You hear some of those nightmare scary stories. And yeah, you just don't know maybe who's going to be a legit, like really does know about photography lawyer versus somebody who maybe just says they are, but they don't really. So that's fantastic. I love that you have that resource because you are definitely a trusted adult to do that with.
A trusted adult? I don't know if I'm a trusted adult. I might be a trusted attorney.
It's like, that's a very mom phrase to say. Trusted adult.
A trusted adult.
No, but it's funny as I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking about how the general public kind of devalues creatives. Lawyers do have that. I don't know. We just have reputation for being skeezy and liars and devious and all of this sort of stuff. And I normally have my nose ring in. I washed my face earlier, so I took it out. But that's why I leave my nose ring in when I go to events. I wear jeans, because I am laid back and I don't really want to be all dressed up all the time. But because I'm one of you all. I think that's the thing is like, I'm not a lawyer sitting in an ivory tower. I am going to give you the law, like I mentioned, but I'm really going to dig in more. Like, what is the strategy? Where are you going? What are the circumstances that you're in and how can we best resolve this? I tell my clients all the time at the law firm, I'm the worst salesperson. I could tell you 10 ways from Sunday that I'll take your money, but you're not going to be happy in the end. And what does that do for me? Nothing. Like, it's not worth, getting money just to have an unhappy client that didn't get anything resolved. Now, do we resolve everything? No, life happens. But, and I think that's the big. And actually, maybe that would be a good question we didn't have on the list of like what to look for an attorney is asking them their process. How does this work? What are you going to be able to do? What happens if I don't achieve my goals? And I always have a really frank conversation with my clients up front, especially when we're looking at like copyright infringement and breach of contract cases of like, okay, you're wanting to get 100K out of this. You're not getting 100K out of this from that client, that infringing party. And so someone that's going to be really transparent and not just feed you BS to pad their billables is incredibly important.
Awesome. Yeah. That's really good info.
And then so you brought up copyright infringement because I know that is such a big thing. And in the group, people are always asking. I mean, I have had that happen. I didn't do anything about it, but Now I kind of wish I did. And is that a big portion of the work you do? Would you say that's like most of it? Okay.
Oh, number one.
Yeah.
Wow.
With trademark registrations and then contracts kind of close behind.
Okay.
Yeah, copyright
Wow.
infringement. I mean, it probably just, imagine the majority of my audience is photographers and it happens all
Yep.
the time. So yeah, and copyright, and it happens to me all the time. People take my images and then they tag me like and I'm like, thank you for alerting me to your infringing of my photograph.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm one of those that you got to look at your resources. You have to pick your battles, and copyright infringement is one of those cases. Is that the law is not set up to really benefit the creative, the photographer. Unfortunately, it really does require some steps to do and monitor and cash outlay with the potential of no return. It sucks. It's not good for us right now, unfortunately.
And then, because I know you have to register, it's best for your image to be registered, like with the Copyright Office. And is that something that can happen post it being infringed upon, or does that really? Because I'm imagining like registering all my wedding photos.
I know. Makes my blood pressure go up thinking about it. Yeah. So 99% of the copyright infringement cases that I do come from the law talk. They're not registered photographs. Majority of those, we still are able to get a recovery. But that being said, yeah, you're right on the money. Like in the US, and we didn't give any disclaimer at the top. I probably should have said, I'm a lawyer, but not your lawyer. This is general info. Here's my disclaimer.
Yes.
But in the US, we don't have to register our photographs. We still have common law protections. That being said, you're going to get increased damages, potential for attorney's fees, and a stronger threat of suit if you do have a registration. But to your question, can you do it post? You could register now. So let's say you went through and you're like, you know what? I use these 50 key images over the last 8 years in my marketing that are my ones that I repeatedly use, I want to protect. You can go register them now, but it's not going to retroactively protect any infringing uses before that registration. It will do any new uses moving forward. And that's kind of one of the things that we look at too. When people come to me for copyright infringement stuff, I always say, don't rush to reach out to the infringer. Don't rush to do registration. Let's talk about it for a reason, because I had a big case and it's on the law talk. It was an Airbnb one where they were unregistered photographs. We had the fish on the line, right? We were in negotiations getting decent money for the unregistered photographs, but we continued to monitor the behavior of the media outlets that Airbnb was using that year. And it was like the end of the year, and they were doing like the top 20 locations to go in whatever year it was. And they were repeated because it was part of a media package. They kept using these photographers' photographs over and over. So if the photographer had ran to go get the registration done, if they had just listened to the last 2 minutes and didn't listen to the next part, we had been sitting waiting for the registration for how many months? Since I knew that behavior was happening, I'm watching it online. I said, let's pay the extra rush fee, it's pretty heavy rush fee. We got it. Actually, I think this week is the anniversary of it. It was like April 21st that we got a registration. On the 22nd, we found 7 new infringing uses under registration. It added 2 zeros to the end of the settlement.
Wow.
So, and it's an extreme example, but yeah, registration, it's relatively low cost. I can't even remember what the copyright fees are right now. We're talking like $30 for an image, but you can do galleries of up to 750.
Okay.
And I think it's like $75. Don't quote me. They just changed it recently, but it is relatively low cost to kind of hedge your bets for, if it's going to happen. Now, should you do all your photos? That's the lawyer side. Yes. Register all your photos. The reality, just real world activity and money, not everyone's probably going to go and do that unless you're maybe like a real estate photographer who's pumping out licensing these photos as another revenue stream. Typical portrait photographers, wedding photographers aren't going to register them all. And that's why I mentioned maybe start with the ones that are the key ones that you use in your marketing repeatedly. But then again, I just had a photographer this week I talked with, she goes, I don't know why they took this photo. It's not even that good. It was her own work. And I was like, they obviously liked it. But her point is she would have never registered that one because she didn't think it was that
She didn't
great.
think, It's not so. I know
Yeah.
us photographers always getting down on ourselves about our images, and here they are.
Yes.
They were
But
good
it's
enough for
true. I've
somebody to
seen some
steal.
come through and I'll look at the photographer's work and I'm like, there's like 500 other amazing ones they could have used. And this is what you stole. But, beauty
Go
is in the eye
figure.
of the infringer, I guess. I don't know.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I want that on a mug or something right
I
there.
need that one. I just made that up. Like,
I
just,
love
okay,
that. That's
I'm happy to get
fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to end with a question we ask everybody that we interview on here is looking back, knowing what you know now, what would you do different in your career?
probably take more chances. I've never been
Mm.
really scared to fail at anything professionally. Actually, you know what? I do have an example for you. And I think a lot of the listeners will probably subscribe to this. I got in the photography industry as it was the mom talks were coming up, right? It was the big
Mhm.
influx DSLRs. And I remember it was under the Law Talk brand. I was super personal. This was about 12 years ago. And I was super personal, sharing a lot of personal stuff online about being a mom, etc., being a photographer. And I don't even know the guy's name. I don't even have the screenshot of the comment anymore. But this guy, random dude, I don't even know if he was a photographer, said, "Oh, you're just another mom tog." And I let it hit me so much that I actually shifted the Law Tog's entire marketing strategy to be more corporate. And I felt like I did a disservice to everyone in the industry because I shrunk
Mm.
myself over some
Mhm.
random stranger's comment. And it's
Mhm.
so funny how that still sticks out to me today. I can
Yep.
remember reading
Yeah.
it,
Yep.
and that would probably be the one thing because I feel like I lost a few years. Or were there photographers that it didn't help because I didn't put myself out there as much, all because of this one? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
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 Thank you for sharing that. And that, I hate that. Like mom tog. Like there's plenty of dad togs out there and we're not
Yeah,
labeling
they're
them.
definitely not called that.
They're
No.
not
We
called
should start
that.
calling them that and see.
Just
I
dad
like it. I
togs.
think it's cute, actually.
It's kind of a dad tog. Um, but yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think even today, because women are still underrepresented in the industry.
Mhm.
Just even in who's speaking at conferences, who's doing the sponsorships, what camera companies are sponsoring.
Yeah.
And women have brought so much to the industry that men have not. They
Mhm.
really have. And it's so
Yeah.
much more than like our status as a parent or not a
Mhm.
parent. But that stuff does stick.
It
And
does.
we had a comment on
We
our
did have a
YouTube
comment on one of
channel
our YouTube channel
that was
episodes, yeah.
it's just random dude, like, he called us, like, quacking chicks or I don't know, something like
You
I
should
don't
put that on a mug
There
and
I
we
hold it
go,
up.
right?
I don't remember, but I remember my first instinct, I deleted it. Just
Yeah.
I was so angry, and I was just delete it, and later I was like, "I should have left it up there," because most
Yeah.
people would see that and be like,
Yeah.
"He's
He's a
terrible."
total loser. This is a
And
person
people will
who
take
yeah.
up, yeah, or people will take up for you. I had one of the business courses that I have outside of the Law Talk is just for general entrepreneurs. I had actual CPA tell me I would never take you seriously because you have ripped jeans in your photo. And I very snarkily wanted to be like, I don't want your money anyway. Like, like, I
Yeah.
just, and
Yep.
everyone else is like, we love that you're relatable. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to change. But I only got there because of Joe Schmo back in 2012 that made
No.
that comment.
Yep. 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 And you
Mm.
have done so much as a mom.
Mhm.
Which is just amazing. I mean, we're like, because we talk a lot about that, how there's different phases in our life too. Because both Amanda and Aaron have young kids where
Mhm.
there's still so much parenting going on, and I have a 12-year-old, which has absolutely made it easier.
Yes.
He sleeps through the night, which
Yeah.
took a very long time to get there. But and this actually isn't our I'm giving you one more question.
No, you're
Um,
fine. You're good.
how do you feel like being a parent has affected your career path?
I mean, I kind of touched on it in the beginning. I got into being a business owner because I had to be, right? Someone had to be around with my son. I was going through cancer stuff. My husband was in and out to Iraq. I kind of was forced to figure it out, sink or swim. And so it has pushed me probably further than if I had waited to have kids later. I don't think I would be where I'm at. As you were talking, I was thinking back to trying to do client calls, hiding in the bathroom when they were little, like because they wouldn't nap and things like that. And at the time, I was like, I hate this. And now, I just, I think it's pushed me further, and it makes me kind of like my whole approach to everything. Just it brings real world to it all. And I know I've said that multiple times, but I think that's one thing when we get in business, it's really easy for us to get so focused on metrics and, KPIs, data, the finances, and we don't just stop and go, hold on, how does this actually apply in my real life? I actually did a presentation a couple months ago and I brought out the 5 toughest things that I learned in business. And one of them was exactly what you're talking about, that age of having kids that young and trying to build business. But I wouldn't change it. Notice that was not the answer for changing it, because it forced me to automate. It forced me to be more efficient. Whereas I think I'd have just been lazier and had a slower trajectory if I didn't have, well, in the beginnings, we needed the money. But then once the ball got rolling after that, having them watch me, like my 14-year-old daughter tells me she's going to take over the law firm.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so
I'm like,
good.
if it's still there, I might sell it before you get old enough. But, and I think you two would probably agree, just being a mom also, I don't know. When I was in law school, I liked having photography because it balanced my brain out a bit. And so I feel like being a parent and also, I won't just say a mom, but being a parent and having a business helps to balance me, just balance. I know that I hate that word, but like mentally balanced, not trying, I don't balance at all. It's always like this. It's always but I just helps, I guess centered is the word that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Helps me be more
That's great. Yeah. I love it.
Oh, this has been such an amazing conversation.
It has been
so much.
Yes.
What is it? The quacking chicks?
The quacking chicks.
I don't even think that's exactly what he said, but
Yeah, but that's better.
I like it. Yeah, it'll be my own. We'll just call ourselves
instead of that. We're just
going
to do root for your damn self.
Yeah.
That's fine. Anyways, thank you so much, Rachel. We appreciate having you on. For our audience out there, we are going to put all of Rachel's info in the description below so that you can find her on the Law Talk. You can find her on Instagram. You can find her in all of the places. So definitely check her out. And thank you again, Rachel. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And thank you all for joining for another episode of The Edit. And we will see you next week.
See you next week. Okay, Photo BFFs, if you have not subscribed, do that right now so you never miss a new episode. You can also find us at theeditweekly.com, where we have free resources and downloads for you to help grow your photo business.